Yeah. Okay. Yeah, send it to Oh, yeah. Yeah. So you can send it. Okay.
Anderson, Carlson,
Here.
Doherty,
Here.
Fitton,
Here.
Adich.
The motion to accept the agenda as presented. Is there support?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Public input, any public input at this time? Hearing none, we will move on to correspondences. 4.1, LRIP grant funding.
There's a copy of the letter from Minnesota Department of Transportation in your packet announcing that we were approved for local road improvement funds. This would be to repair what's on your map right here. The section hatched in red and then into the blue, except for the brand new bridge. This was an application that we put take care of that whole piece of the hall where he and I think the source of the problem, and it goes all the way out, relocates that road and rounds it out. Like the other one.
That's great. So this will take care of the road that you see here in front of Pine Street, which is in front of the fire hall. It's notoriously one of the worst sections of roadway in town, up to where the new bridge was replaced, in front of the old iron ore bar, and then the movement of the road right here, which is Harbor Drive, and rounding it out there for development purposes. And that is in the amount of $420,000. This funding will require a match, correct? Okay. And what amount is, the amount that we are responsible for on that match would be 186. Okay. this is just correspondences to let us know that we did in fact receive that funding.
And the plan to come up with the 186 is,
To be determined at this time.
There's a couple of different routes we could go to get that funding. Obviously, something happening in the harbor is that would be the ideal thing. That would give an appetite for the IRRB to help us cover that shortfall. The other route that we can go to match that funding would be to possibly ask for funding from the Anderson Trust as well. So we have a couple of different options there down the road to be able to fund that match, which would be a great project to take care of a chunk of the Blue Coal roadway and help us on the development side down the harbor as well. Any questions on 4.1? If not, we'll move to number 5, unfinished business. 5.1, development agreement.
Just the one.
Hello?
Jeremy,
Yeah.
Josh Carlson here.
How's it going?
Good, how are you? Still
Can you hear me
there?
all right?
Yep. Okay, so we're on 5.1, talking about the development agreement. And since our last meeting, Linda has found some things that affect that development agreement. Linda, I'll let you go ahead and explain some of those things.
As we were preparing to draft the agreement with the terms of council at the last meeting, looking over the statutes and making sure everything was legal and legit and we were in good shape. Our attorney came back to us and said that the 12% would not be okay for a couple of reasons. One, you're committing the county to that. So then the county willing to commit to that rate for everybody going forward. And then statutorily for us, it would not be okay. A city can only offer prime plus 2. Normally, when you go out, when we ask Nick to put out a bond or a request for a bond for us, he would take the lowest bidder, so therefore you could competitively bid it by taking basically the high bidder. You do not competitive bidding and the amount of the return as well over that threshold. So statutorily, we can't go forward with the arrangement you approved at the last meeting. So all we can approve.
So, I looked as much as I could at the statute and had our attorney take a look at it. And, if it was a bonding, number one, if it is a bond, which I'm not sure it is with the way this tax reimbursement is structured. And maybe there's some detail in how it's structured that I'm missing and our attorney doesn't understand. But even so, they couldn't find the statute, and I went to what you sent them and looked through those subsections and everything, and even with that, can't find language that says that there's a statutory limit on it. So I'm kind of missing that piece. Number one. Number two, I'm wondering, why is this even a bond technically? Because we're paying, we're getting a reimbursement through taxes, but that's not a bond issuance.
On the city side, it is no matter what, we're entering into debt. So call it a bond.
Well, you're not entering into debt though. That's my point.
Well, we are
You
entering.
guys are not borrowing. No, you're reimbursing based on a revenue that you may or may not get, and you're not incurring any debt. You're not responsible for
We are entering into a payment agreement which requires us to pay the developer a certain set of funds, which is by all standards, city entering into it. You can call it an agreement. you can call it-
Somehow I think we need to look into that because every place I'm checking disagrees that it's by Minnesota state statute that it's considered debt. There's no required repayment from the city regardless of where funds come from, which would be what the debt is. It's only based on a percentage of tax that they get, and only if they get it.
I don't know, it's still an agreement, you're still paying tax dollars, city tax dollars, public tax dollars to a private entity.
Well, the tax abatement statute is different than the bond statute, and it's not a debt on the statute side.
I'm only going on the advice I was given. We're pledging public tax dollars without having competitively bid or follow the statutes. I guess that's pure and simple.
Well, I mean, but I thought we were here because the city is not going to bond for it. They don't want to.
We don't want to bond for it. I guess when I say bond, it's entering into the agreement with Tower, whatever, to pay them back. And by entering into that agreement, you're making an arrangement for debt, you're making an arrangement for payments. You're pledging tax dollars, future tax dollars.
So is there another party outside of us that will do the same deal? I mean, we're happy to have someone else pay for it.
If they
That would be going to the market for that.
if they want to pay prime plus 2 or less.
But they'll do it without getting any guaranteed repayment and everything?
I don't know, that would be the terms. We'd have to put that out.
I mean, I would love it someone else did it. I just don't see it happening, and I thought that you had been looking for debt, which is how we got here, because the debt required a guarantee that doesn't exist.
So this came on the advice of our attorney.
Correct.
It goes against what we have in our charter.
That would be a problem if, it depends on, the original agreement was with TIA, this council would have to approve that TIA does not have the authority to enter into debt based on the charter, so you would have to agree to it or enter into this repayment agreement. The council would have to do that. And if you're pledging tax dollars, you have to make sure that you use them in the best fashion and the least amount of them as you possibly could.
Agreed. I mean, I would love for someone else to do it, the same thing we're doing with the same risk, cheaper. That would make my life a lot easier, for sure.
I don't know that we have another interested party. I guess that the offer was back to you.
I agree, you probably don't. That's my point. It's like, you know, it's based on what the market will bear. I mean, there is language referencing that, but I don't see anyone else risking that.
So at the end of the day, we would have to competitively bid this. We can't just say, yep, we're gonna do this and we'll give you 12%. We simply cannot do that. I'm not sure, I'm not sure where we go from here.
Well, I mean, I frankly, I think what we need to do is a couple things. I think our attorney needs to speak with your attorney because there's loss in translation from all the statutes that have been referenced and given to us. Because on what the legal statute is that's being, described or whatever. And I'm not an attorney, and I'd rather have our attorney look at it so that they're clear on it. So I think that would be, step number one is making sure that is correct. If there's someone else that will do it cheaper with the same, risk, that'd be great. I don't know how you get an RFP and responses out fast enough to achieve that result to the, to the letter of the law, supposedly, for whatever is needed to be quote unquote market rate and all that stuff.
Do you have any information from our attorney on this?
No, Christopher was traveling at the time that we talked, so we talked mostly over the phone. He did give me a couple of statutes that I have sent to Jeremy. He pointed me to a couple of handbooks that the league has put out, which reference the prime plus two. He seemed pretty straightforward. And then the other fact that he had on his mind was that the county would never agree to a 12% return, because in essence then you open them to agreeing to 12% return on all parties that come forward moving forward. We set a precedent for that. Even though you could say that their money could go only to cover the infrastructure, but you can't split the pot that way. They're paying the interest as well as the principal. And so we'll get hung up on that stage too.
But again, I think the whole purpose for us to get here is so that we can approach the county. I mean, last meeting we were talking, we need to get here so we can even talk to the county. Because at this point, we're all talking in theory. And because of everything I keep hearing, the county won't talk to us until we have a development agreement. And we need to get through this piece first. And, again, I forwarded the statutes that Linda sent to me to our attorney. I looked them up myself. Granted, they're relatively long, and I only had, basically today to look through it. So I couldn't find it, and our attorney couldn't find it. And our attorney, who does, lives in Minnesota and is even counsel for another city, didn't have any idea that there was a state statute limiting it. So I think our attorneys need to get on the phone together so that at least they're speaking the same language.
Jeremy, refresh my memory here. You guys came forward with this, or when you came forward with this proposal, this is what you needed in order to pull this off. Is that correct?
Right. So you can, if you want to revisit, you can go back even farther, right? So the city was bonding, but essentially was passing the entire risk on to us by having us re-bond for it, essentially, which is not the risk profile that we would operate under, given the project and the phasing that we all want to go through and stuff like that. So the alternative was, the question became, what do we do that mitigates risk to the city? And this is the only alternative we have where I'm looking at it, and the city has zero financial risk. I appreciate that it maybe cuts into their potential future tax revenues, but it doesn't cut into it perpetually. It's revenues that wouldn't exist if we didn't front the money for this infrastructure cost. And so there's no, when you run the test of, cost benefit, the city benefits because it's dollars that wouldn't even have existed unless we spent them on, right? So that's how we got here, in my opinion. I don't know another source of funding to bridge this gap that we talked about.
I don't either.
Okay.
I don't either. And in the event that the county does not agree with these terms, which seems highly likely, again, speaking in theory, but from everything that we've been told, the likelihood is that it will not happen. Where would you see this going from there?
We would, one, we would look at other phasing sources or funding sources for phase one, and probably, which is in the way that, at least what I believe and what the development agreement would allow for. That if we get additional funding sources in phase one, our number that we're coming out for the infrastructure for phase one would be less, and therefore the math would work on the city side without as much help from the county. So I'd have to run, without the county telling me what amortization they allow, which could be different than the city, and I appreciate that. I'd have to run the amortization table and see what would work. But if we got some funding for, I'm going off of memory here from the last meeting, but the number for the phase one infrastructure was, I want to say 276. I don't know if Matt Bolt is there or not, but it was the number that we were chatting about in the last council meeting. And if we get some money from IRRB, and we're only talking about phase one, and we get a lower rate from the county, then that math still might work, assuming that they'll give, it all comes down to what percentage and what interest rate. Those both go into the equation of what the repayment is based on the delta that's left from the 276 number. And unless we have an agreement that even allows us to talk to the county, I can't answer that. But, I just, off the top of my head, I would think if we get a decent amount for IRRB, for example, and the number is not 276, it's 176, that makes the repayment a heck of a lot easier for the county to maybe give, call it 80% and only a 5% return. But I have to, I can't put the math in until I know at least some more pieces of the equation. I just don't, we keep saying that we can't go any farther forward with the other funding sources that we're trying to collectively approach until we have a development agreement. And what I keep hearing back that is frustrating me, frankly, is that, well, we aren't going to go forward because we know the future's not going to be good in that regard. Well, no, we don't. We haven't approached them collectively yet to really get a true response. I appreciate we've had past conversations with them, but those are old conversations, and that's before we have a go forward opportunity now, right? We don't have a development agreement signed to approach these guys. I don't think we should be hung up if it's statutorily, not allowed, then I agree. But if the council is comfortable with the concept, assuming it's allowed statutorily, then from what I'm hearing from our attorney, I think that there's a gap in communication that I'm not understanding, and I would like our attorney to speak with your attorney to make sure people are understanding the structure correctly.
What else? Did Chris give a definitive answer here as far as,
Just at that 12%, everyone that I've talked to, I got laughed at for suggesting such a ludicrous option. So I mean, it wasn't, everybody, Nick Scarrish said the same thing, competitive bidding was a problem, Christopher said the same thing. No one that I found on any level, whether it be city, grant funder, county, whatever, was willing to support this in any way and couldn't really fathom how they got this far with that percentage in there.
So here's what, I'll reiterate what I said last, and this is not anywhere close to my area of expertise. This is very, very tough. But what I don't quite understand is how we're going to put numbers figures together into a development agreement that we can sign and forward off to the county for a yay or nay. If we don't know, how can we send off development agreement if we don't know figures and numbers, or what we can put in there, you know? I don't know. I don't know, this is all very convoluted to me. So, it's very hard to Chris and go from there. What's that? I'm just looking where it's not. Instead of sitting here beating our heads over and over. Well, I mean,
I'm not sure who said that, but that's kind of what I agree. You know, we need to have them talking. My caveat to that is, assuming that it is, you know, it falls within the statutes that exist, you know, is this something that the council at least agrees with? Because I don't want to go forward and find out that this can be done. You know, there's a process that allows for this to happen. And then here again, the council, well, you know, we don't like it. I appreciate that it's relatively expensive money, but bid it competitively. I'd be happy to have someone do it cheaper. I just don't know of anybody that will.
I don't even, I mean, we know we can't do 12%, sure thing.
You know, you can't do 12% because you don't like the number, or you can't do 12% because of the statute.
Well, I mean, it was made very, very clear that we can't do that, and truthfully, I'm not comfortable with the number, and never did it since the last meeting that we ever did it, that part of it.
Well, if that's the feeling, I'm concerned, because 2 weeks ago, I appreciate that it's expensive, but it mitigates the risk, and we talked about this last council meeting, I thought.
We absolutely did, and,
I mean, I can only solve so many problems.
What's that?
I can only solve so many problems. I need to know where people stand if we're gonna go through it.
I agree with that, letting the lawyers talk it out and figure out where we're at. I mean, we agreed to move forward with this.
I don't know that our lawyer's gonna change his mind. I mean,
I haven't seen anything.
I haven't seen a piece of paper about it.
I haven't seen anything in writing until I see it in writing.
oh, I mean, it's not hearsay.
Well, to me, I don't see anything that says that it's not. Right now. You guys don't think we'll be-
I just don't know enough about it. I think, the lawyers should probably talk one more time, but even if they tell us the same thing.
How's that gonna change it? I'm just throwing out ideas out here. You know, we've done the stands for 3 years now. I mean, 3 years, trying to figure out how to do this. I mean, do we come to the realization that we don't have a working project? Is anybody feeling that way? That's what is that what everybody's feeling, is that the lawyer's thought?
I'll support.
Is there any other discussion? I'm losing faith that we have a workable project here. I really am.
I feel like that should be the last time.
So let me respond to that a little bit. I mean, frankly, we're coming up with the infrastructure cost and putting the risk on ourselves for that cost. Whenever we first spoke about this, and I hate to say it, but Gary Lampa kept telling us, the city will get the money for the infrastructure. And then it was found out that it was more expensive than what the city anticipated, and that's how we got here. And I keep going down and trying to find solutions. And we're at a point now where if it's statutorily doable, we have a project. I hate the fact that I'm hearing, frankly, that people don't think we have a project when we've gotten when we've crossed so many hurdles at this point.
Okay, so we have a motion and second on the table. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. So we'll have Chris and Jeremy's attorney hash things up. Anything else, Jeremy?
I guess the only other thing is, I just don't know a plat status. I know it was submitted, again, with the comments. I don't know what that means in the way of, timing response and all that. I mean, I talked to Matt previously, the council approves it. It's basically a recording at the county. I don't know what the status of that is.
Planning and zoning will look at it tomorrow, and we should know something at the next council meeting.
Planning and zoning will be looking at it tomorrow, and we should have something on the 10th.
So it's going to P&Z tomorrow for approval of the plat? And that will be the agenda item?
That is the agenda item, yes.
Okay. All right.
All right?
That was the only one. Yep.
Great, thanks, Jeremy.
All right, thank you.
Bye. We'll move on to 5.2, residential tear down project update.
At the last meeting, you'll recall that we accepted the bid from G-Man and a copy of a couple of them, one of them on the table. And what I think was pending at the time was an asbestos study. The asbestos study has been done on both homes. Unfortunately, there was asbestos found in the 711 Main Street. It was found in the second layer of flooring and then some fibrous board around the furnace. So you'll see in your packet, there's an email from G-Man that the additional cost to take care of those two items of asbestos raises the quote by $1,200.
Okay.
So I just need approval to accept that additional cost. And there was no asbestos in those 12
And both of our homeowners are agreeable to the terms.
One of your owners is here tonight, and the other one is in assisted living, so we can participate.
Fine with me.
Very good. So we've got a motion to accept the quote from G-Man. Total proposal price updated after the $1,200 increase for the asbestos abatement. The total price now stands at $15,020. What was that added on? Oh, I thought this was this?
That was the original.
What was it? Okay, so now we're at 16,220.
Yeah, that's my.
Okay, 16,220.
That's the second.
It is, yep, okay, so 16,220, 75% of which will be covered by the RRB's demolition program. The rest is a 50-50 split between the city and homeowner.
Does this take into account the additional 1,200 or?
No, that was what you agreed to at the last meeting,
So
and then the 12 would be.
So the 16
support it.
Did you, excuse me, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Did you hear anything back on 408 South Second Street, or are they interested in the 50-50 split, or what was?
The county right now has a lien against the property,
Okay.
so once the lien is cleared, there really wouldn't be much left. For all of his, care that he's received, that he's not able to pay for, through his income, they put a lien, so whatever that property gets sold for, they're the first party right now, so that there isn't anything to get. So they'll end up, the county will end up selling it to recoup some of their costs.
So what
But
about?
would we do assess, we do have the ability to assess that.
You could assess it, and then chances are it'll probably sit on the tax roll. And then they'll pick it up, 'cause why would you? Unless you really intend to build something, but it's not a full lot. It's low in the back. You could try to obtain title, but you're not gonna have clear title.
Well, I think we should definitely assess it to the taxes and put our best foot forward to try and,
Which are
maintain the title of it. And that's the,
We can do that and we can, leave the place and we can clear what you can say.
okay, so,
So that part of your motion then?
you know, amend your motion to reflect that? Yeah, okay. Is there support for the motion?
Support.
Brooks has support. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Move to 6.1, LCCMR Phase 2, SEH supplemental agreement.
We have a master engineering agreement with SEH on all our needs, but as projects come up, we sign supplemental agreements. And when Matt Wolf and I were looking over the agreements, we noticed we don't have one signed for the second phase of the LCCMR project. And now that we have that Pine Strip, that Elbert project, so that's a 6-1 and 6-2.
Okay. Any questions? It's something we can motion to approve the LCCMR Phase 2 SEH supplemental agreement. Is there a motion? Is there support?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
This is the same exact thing, so this would be for the Pine Street.
Second, yeah, $7 for the Pine Street project. We would simply need a motion to approve that agreement as well. Ben's got the motion, is there support?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. That's this one here. This is where you want me? All right, we'll move on to 6.3. RFP.
I didn't know what was gonna happen with, 5.1, and, I didn't know if you're gonna stay the course with this developer, go back out. I had originally an RFQ that got us where we're at, request for proposal. I don't know if you wanna table this until you hear back, or start drafting.
In lieu of what we, in lieu of the decision made on 5.1, we'll have to table this one. Is there a motion to table?
So moved.
Support?
Support.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Move to 6.4, emergency airport operations permit.
As you know, we talked about putting in a septic tank system at the airport, and then we also have some trees. There are the ones on the Food Point Beach, that are encroaching into the flight path, or flight slope, I should say. And, we did secure an emergency grant from MINDOT to cover those 75% of those expenses. And you'll see that we've got a local share of 8,206.
If the full amount is spent, or?
Yeah. And that's based off the bid for the holding tank project and then the quotes that we received for the tree removal. And the lowest bidder for the tree removal was, Rick Hansen.
Where are these trees?
They're the big pine trees right on the, what we call the old beach, over by that pavilion. So that's backup property, that's right along the lake there. Most of them are encroaching 6 to 10 feet, somewhere in there. So they'll be topped, not gonna be taken down, they'll be topped, and trimmed and pruned.
Okay.
They're too nice to trees to lose.
Alright. I'll motion, I'll make a motion to accept.
Support? Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Move to 6.5, the ambulance director report.
So, I'll apologize right off. I'm gonna blaze through as quickly as I can. This is basically because of another long article that's kind of meant to misinform and scare people as far as the ambulance and what's going on. Chief Lewis, well, I talked to him on Tuesday and then he texted me on Thursday after reading the article. We'll get to that shortly. First of all, I need to say, as far as the paid on call, there's something that's been intentionally left out of all these articles this year. That is the fact that several times when this was discussed in council meetings, the PLC program was stated that it's not written in stone. If something needs to be adjusted or changed, it would and can be. Starting with January 18th, making sure there's someone trained and available to respond when 911 call goes out has become a bigger challenge for many communities, according to emergency medical officials and everybody interviewed. Volunteerism is dead is how one will belong in a precise situation when young people and parents are physically forced to work longer hours, make ends meet, and with greater focus on family life, fewer potential recruits are available to staff volunteer emergency services like fire and ambulance. And that puts more pressure on those who respond when the call goes out. So, Marshall has helped confirm that you can no longer run an emergency service with just volunteers anymore, which those of us doing the work already knew that. To be perfectly blunt at this point, because I guess the whole concept is kind of escaped everybody, or maybe just not explained properly, but if paid on call fails, the ambulance fails. The volunteer staff, the very few that have been carrying the service and sacrificed a lot to do that over the last few years, have already stated they cannot and will not cover the number of medical calls anymore. Last year I added EMR as a quick kind of help and fix to our staff, and that did help a lot. A permanent solution was needed. That's how paid on call came about. The state had been urging since Bernie actually to figure out some sort of paid on call because our call volumes kept increasing. This is not new. This has happened in many places where you start missing calls, the state comes in and takes your license away to operate an ambulance. That is what we're working on avoiding happening. So, there's a whole lot in this. So I'm just gonna, I just highlighted a couple things. What's the next section? Yeah, so it talks about, the next section I highlighted was, in Tower's case, the city council approved the plan for after a 15-minute presentation by the city's ambulance director that failed to account for tens of thousands of dollars in costs associated with the plan. We made assumptions that are unrealistic regarding potential new revenue from Hospital transfers and assumed, we believe incorrectly, that the AOC hires for work for 60-hour shifts when not subject to overtime rules. Most other ambulance service directors have established staffing systems to avoid overtime and minimize the side cost. So this was one of the things, and there's trains of emails that he sent back and forth to the city arguing that the league wasn't right, that he knew the law, we were wrong, the city's lawyer was wrong, we had to pay overtime. So that's how we came up with these, that the salaries were gonna be $200,000 for paid on-call staffing. That, you know, that was the first kind of lie. He used his Marshall math to manipulate all our financial information, add imaginary salary expenses, and extrapolate that into some ridiculous numbers. So extrapolate this. We have had 7 months now of paid on-call salary, paid $58,571. That breaks down into $8,367.29 a month. If you multiply that then by 12, 1 year of paid on-call salaries is $100,407.48. So I'm just gonna say, let's round it up to 105 for good measure, right? Add 12,000 for ambulance quarters. We're not actually spending $1,000 a month, but we're spending about 600, but we haven't paid for all the fuel for winter months yet, so $1,000 a month, fine. Spent 5,000 roughly on startup costs. Add $2,050 for routine rig maintenance because you're doing more runs. Our normal rig maintenance for the rigs has been $4,100 a year. Jacking that up by 50%, which we're not doing 50% more calls, and we're not putting on 50% more miles. So I think that's a fair amount, $2,000. That brings the total for 1 year of paid on call to $124,000.50. This is based on actual real bills now. That is well below what I stated the 150,000 max would be for paid on call staff. So also we discussed that we kind of needed to let the program run for a year, so we really had a good idea. But it wasn't even up and running, and is being ripped down and torn apart falsely with false information. So, all right. He then went into the stuff about the transfers. At an average of 6 hours per transfer, the service demanded 864 hours of volunteer time just for transfers last year. Well, we didn't demand anything of anybody for transfers. Transfers are absolutely 100% volunteer. If people have time to take them, they take them. Nobody's made to take transfers. And let's see, so finally, rather than focus on increasing transfers to generate revenue, the ambulance service should be exploring how it can up its game by transitioning over time to an advanced life support service through the use of more paramedics, which has also been stated that is our next goal. Paid on-call staffing took a total of 15 months to actually get up and running. But we're supposed to jump into ALS service. That takes time and a lot more money. You just don't make that kind of leap. You have to build towards that. But before doing anything, the city needs to fully understand the implications to mission, costs, and sources of revenue. This is too important to leave to back of the napkin figuring. Seriously? My back of the napkin figuring numbers apparently are way better than what he was doing. He said $200,000 or more just for salary. He said our salary cost for the whole service was going to be $250 plus. This is all his. These are his numbers in his articles. You can go back and read all this. All right, moving on quickly. However, this is from a second giant article. Let's check the 18th one. Anyway, this is March 15th. Him and I sat down because I challenged him on these numbers and challenged because he was still insisting paid on call had to be overtime pay and all the numbers when they were put together. And the clerk treasurer helped me put what we have to pay people, so that was all calculated in there. And that was broken down. That plan was done twice, actually, because the original incarnation in 2017, nobody took the job, because we didn't have porters, and none of the people that lived here in town wanted the job. Got way better paying jobs, so. It did revamp a couple little things in that, and then came back in 2018 and said, you know, can we try this again? Here's all these figures, here's all the numbers, here's how we can do this. So, it says, in this article from March, it says, however, final budget numbers for the ambulance from 2017 show a drop in the service's operating margins even before hiring additional staff. Well, yeah, that's true, but it leaves something very important out of there. We did add $102,000 in change to the ambulance fund. We didn't add more. We made more than that. But I already had started spending thousands and thousands of dollars replacing and updating outdated equipment and getting equipment that we didn't have that we needed. So the only reason we only went up $102,000 was because I was already upgrading stuff for the service. So I know in some other article he called that a modest increase. Okay. I had challenged him in this interview, how much money would you like the ambulance to make, and what would you like me to do with all that money? Well, we put it back into the service like it's intended. Not really sure what the problem is. Altenberg was also contradictory at times, sometimes acknowledging the on-call proposal will diminish current budget surpluses, at other times going back to his previous claims that the plan would more than pay for itself. Well, those two are not mutually exclusive, it's both. Obviously, if we're making more money, but we're spending more money on the service through staffing, so yes, we're not going to profit as much, clearly, because it's the money they're earning is going towards paying their wages and stuff. And the program also will pay for itself. Actually, 2018 is already paid for. The work that they've done has already surpassed what they're going to spend for the year for paid on-call staffing. We'll get to that shortly. I'll give you the numbers. Let's see. As long as we're not losing money, who cares? We're for not-profit agency. That's exactly right. We are the only public ambulance that I am aware of in the entire area that actually makes any profit. There are no other public ambulances. They all run deficits that are funded out of the general funds. I got numbers to give you for that. Altenberg said he wants to add a third rig to the service as well as backup ambulance, and can run as much as $200,000 or more. Well, yes, I did want to add a third rig. I never said I was going to buy a new rig as a backup rig. That would be ludicrous. But again, Altenberg's plan also assumes that paid on-call staff would not qualify for overtime. It's not an assumption. The damn lawyers told us this. Still arguing it though. Again, saying putting the total price tag of the salaries at approximately $200,000 just for paid on-call. On and on and on and on. Blah, blah, blah. Service's average call volume suggests that on-call workers would be required to complete potentially lengthy work assignments multiple times each shift. I don't even know where that came from. Nobody ever, what lengthy work assignments? I have no idea what that was about. That was just an interesting thing thrown in the so that's enough from that long-winded one. All right, June 13th. This is just slightly relevant, this first part. This is auditor cites growing deficits. That's this article. First part of this article says the city's auditor offered a mixed report on the City of Towers 2017 finances on Monday, while noting that the financial information was complete enough to allow for an unmodified opinion. That sounds horrible. That is an official accounting term, and I'm only bringing this up because the next part is about the analyst. But when I read that, I was like, an unmodified opinion, which people don't understand and wasn't explained, is the highest opinion you can get from your accountants. Basically means they've gone through all your stuff. Your books are clean, you're good to go. There's other stuff in that article that's related to the budget that's, or yeah, this is the stuff that's not, I'm not gonna address, but, because it's other city stuff, but, the line that I needed to point out was, the ambulance is basically carrying the general funds that makes sense. I think it's about time people understand that. It really hasn't, the people that have been working with the city know this and understand what that means and why. Basically, what that comes down to is, the ambulance is already the financial backbone of the city. The Lampa project is a perfect example of that, because the city just doesn't have hundreds of thousands of dollars just laying around to pay these construction bills as they come in. It's the profits from the ambulance that are covering those bills, and then as the money is refunded, because it's a fully funded project, but that takes a month or 2 or 3, they actually start getting refunded. It is the ambulance that's covering that. That means the city has the freedom to do things like that in projects when they come up, and not have to borrow money and pay to get the loans done, and then pay the interest on the loans. You can temporarily use the profits from the ambulance and get the job done quicker. It's a win-win for the ambulance, and that's why it's important that ambulance money does always stay with the ambulance, because it's there for the ambulance, but it's also there for the city when they need it for some quick coverage or something like that. Although, over the last 3 years, the cities have spent tens of thousands of dollars supporting, designing, redesigning all of the supportive roads and infrastructure for the townhome project. City didn't have an extra $50K laying around. Who do you think's covering that unfunded debt right now until it's paid back? It's the ambulance. So, that financial freedom, I think people really, really need to understand what that, how important the ambulance, not just as a service, obviously, because that's first priority to patients, but financially. That is paramount for the city that ambulance stays strong. Myself, I mean, I would never jeopardize the ambulance. All the work that the members have put in to get the service to this point, nobody's gonna jeopardize that. No council, no director. It's insane. All right, so, I was not. That one, sorry, there's a lot. Every one of these was like half-page articles here. All right, next one, revenue income. So this is after I gave you guys the 6-month update on how pay on call was going so far. We had a plus of $62,000, I think it was at the end of September, and change, right? So we had positive revenue. In this article, well, the article is titled "Revenue Increases Surpassed by Higher Expenses Since Paid on Call." What? All right, whatever. Meanwhile, the higher cost of staffing, house rental for staff, increased truck maintenance, and other factors have pushed the department's expenditures higher as well by $142,896 through the end of September. So basically, he's saying paid on call has spent that money. That's how that reads. Paid on call so far this year, and actually the house bills are already paid in November. All the October salaries and stuff are paid in the house bills. So the 58,571 salaries, 9,300, which included the startup costs and the rents, and 2,000, we'll throw the $2,000 in for truck maintenance, is only $69,921. How is that $142,000 expenditures paid on call staff? They're not even connected. And Altenberg mentioned, but did not include in his 6-month financial summary, the cost of equipping a third ambulance. That's because the third ambulance has nothing to do with paid on call. Altenberg again claims the decision is unrelated to the shift to paid on call staffing. Yet the increase in the number of non-emergency transfers the department is undertaking to help pay for the new staffing plan has increased the amount of time that at least one of the department's 2 primary operating out of the area. That has undoubtedly increased the need to put the city's third ambulance into service. No, it has nothing to do with that. In January of 2017, I had said to the council, in the future, we need to kind of look at maybe having a third rig as a backup. And the previous director, Matt Tupel, was starting to feel the same way at the end of his tenure. Too many times in the summertime, it's a bit winter, not so much. Spring, summer, fall is our busy. We were getting back-to-back calls. One rig is out for routine maintenance and safety inspection, and we get 2 calls. So we gotta call somebody else in to take care of it. The call volume, we've been running 2 rigs since I've joined the service. I don't know when they first started running 2 rigs. The medical calls have doubled since then. And yes, we are taking more transfers, but having that third rig is as a backup. We also, the back-to-back-to-back calls have gone higher as well, but it's the back-to-backs is where you really get in trouble when you've got 1 rig getting service and you only have 1 rig left. Also as an emergency, in case 1 rig breaks severely. We had 2 rigs go down severely due to contaminated fuel. He tries to attribute that extra expense, which is now a total of about 15 grand to paid on call. It has nothing, contaminated fuel is not paid on call's fault. This just happened. Like when the engine blew up in the Ford, it just happened and you had to pay for it. So the third ambulance was just kind of a safety measure, kind of practical at this point, considering the number of runs. Just like you had to find a solution to staffing, at some point, you're gonna need to have a backup rig. And that's what Unit 3 is, and financially speaking, since you spent over $19,000 to put a new engine in it, put 3,000 miles on it, and then parked it for almost 6 years, I'm not sure how it's not really responsible to go ahead and take that thing out and use it. We've got nothing to lose at this point but to run it into the ground. It's in better shape than the 2011, quite frankly. It only had, 76,000 when the engine blew up. You got 3,000 miles. It was parked at 79,000 miles. It's got more life in it, especially with, and the box is in good shape still, because it was only 5 years old. Let's see. During his tenure as ambulance director, Albert has consistently argued that the demand for ambulance service and therefore revenue is on a steady rise, further justifying a shift to paid on-call staffing. Yet while call volume has varied from year to year, there's no clear indication of an upward trend for the past few years. Are you kidding me? Have we been paying attention? We had 5 years in a row that went up 20%. There is data support. There's monthly and yearly charts that show all this. There is absolutely the data. I don't think that. Why does anybody need to lie about the call volume? This is not imaginary. Again, he always takes these digs, making it sound like I'm making stuff up, or my stuff is based on real facts, real numbers. All right, this was next one, quick opinion. Let's just say this was after the meet and greet, where he said I painted a rosy picture of the ambulance finances, even though he told members of the city council just 2 weeks earlier that the ambulance budget would look very poor at the end of 2015. Yeah, not because we're not making money, because we got to buy a new rig. We're not making enough money this year to buy a new rig. We're getting that money out of the ambulance fund, but on paper, you're going to show these huge negatives in expenditures. That it is going to look poor, but we are making money. All right. Oh, here we go, the ambulance purchase. It appears, this is November 20th, it appears that the city of Tower is poised to make another very expensive decision without adequate vetting. That issue is the desire, apparently a desire, I got nothing better to do than lust after buying a new ambulance, to spend as much as $250,000 for a new ambulance. I'm not sure what adequate vetting that you've done. There is an ambulance commission. It is comprised of elected officials of the 6 townships and the city of Tower. They are the ones that set up and control that subsidy. They are the ones that set up the schedule of 5-year replacements. Now, they have no issue with the rigs being run a little longer. They're not saying you have to replace it. They understand that the subsidy is behind. It is up to them to find a solution to fix that. The information has been presented to them. Financials have been presented to them as far as how that can be fixed. It would take about 10 years to catch it up unless everybody's willing to dump about 25 extra grand in 2020. Otherwise, you're gonna have to increase the subsidy and give it about 10 years to actually get caught up. But that's not, that's out of my hands. I can't control that, and the city doesn't even control that. That's what that's the commission's job. Been doing it for, I don't even know how many decades now, they've been doing that. So, it is only since the implementation of the city's paid on-call staffing model in April that Altenburg has pushed aggressively for a third rig to enable the service to take more non-emergency. No, I have never once said we need a third rig so we can take more calls. That third rig, luckily we had it sitting there because when both rigs went down, paid on-call staff and I spent about a week getting it cleaned up, outfitted, inspected, safety inspected, maintenance, to get something to be able to answer patient calls. Never have I said we need a rig to do more transfers. The future of POC staffing is in serious doubt. I don't know why. It's making money. Then he goes on, as far as the rigs, Virginia, so here's the thing, this is where we get into Chief Lewis. Virginia operates 5 ambulances to handle 3,500 runs a year, that's 700 runs per unit annually. By contrast, tire service was 450, divided by 3 rigs, that's 150. Well, we're not running 3 rigs at once, we're running 2 and a backup. So the whole idea is, well, unfortunately, 3 has to be parked for the winter. These diesels with their DEF fluid can't sit in a cold building. The 4 can. The DEF fluid freezes. Originally, I wanted to park number 1 and keep using 3 so that we put mileage and wear and tear on that one and then extend the life even further of that one. But I can't do that till it warms up enough in the spring. So 1 and 2 are in service. So yeah, it's not, you're not dividing the 450 by 3 rigs yet. I mean, we will have 3 fully functioning operational rigs, but we're only using 2 at a time and they'll be rotated. All right, so the problem, so one of the things he was complaining about before is that you know, the paid on-call staffing and these extra transfers that they're gonna take is put more wear and tear and cost more in maintenance on the rigs. I go to buy a new rig, and now he's trying to say we're not using them and putting enough wear and tear on them and keeping them long enough. Which is it? No one has ever, the 2011 is going to be going into its 9th year of service in 2019. No one has kept a rig that long. No one has put as many miles on it or any of the rigs as I have. I'm kind of confused. Where was all this fake concern and all these questions and moral outrage about replacing rigs when they were getting replaced every 5 years with 75,000 miles on them? Now suddenly it's an issue. I've kept one going for 8 years, 110 on it right now. We're going to keep using it, but it is aged. All you have to do is look at it. It is time to replace it. The reason the Ambulance Commission set up that 5-year replacement program was they wanted their citizens to be transported in quality, decent running rigs. They didn't want stuff breaking down with people in them or breaking down on the way to patients. That's how that all came about way back when. Now I have no problem. These rigs keep getting more and more expensive. Is stretching the life, get some more out of it, you know. But at some point you do have to replace it. These were not the most expensive rigs in the world. They were never. That's the other reason they were placed at 5 years. But before they get to where they are now, they were getting rid of them, you know, so, yeah, this, oh man, this whole next thing, the rig that Mr. Altenberg wants is a departure from previous ambulance purchases. Yeah, I've explained why. Mr. Altenberg argues that purchasing a high-end ambulance box, this is higher end, it's not the highest end. There are more expensive than this. Rather than a lower cost version of the service has brought in the past, may save the money in end by allowing the service to remount the box on a new chassis. Well, it's not may, it will. So the new rig right now, at $250, it's not really $250 because that 20 grand is a new cot. That's not actually part of the rig. The rest of it is part of the rig. So that's really $230 for the rig itself. 100 grand to remount it, say, even in 7 years. Let's say it only lasts 7 years for some reason. The chassis, not the box. So you remount it for 100 grand. That's 200 or 330,000. That means for 2 rigs, you then spend $165,000. 15 years later, that's the cost of the 2 rigs. You name me any vehicle, you can only go up by 10% over 15 years of cost. Regular vehicles are way beyond that. So that whole plan was to try and help the subsidy last longer, to not have to spend so much money when you replace the rig. And I did say it's possible you could remount those a 3rd time, but don't count on it. You get 2 out of it, that's a good deal. Let's see, Mr. Oliver's plan may or may not work out. Constant updates and standards of emergency services suggest that by the time such a remount is in order, the expensive ambulance box will be outdated regardless of its condition. Well, that's all just made up, because that's not how it works. If it was, we wouldn't be able to run our 3 rigs that we have now. They are not up to current standards. Nobody can keep them up to current standards. The rules for the boxes is when you build a new box, you have to build it to whatever the current standards are. If they change the standards on you, it doesn't matter. That's why we have the cheap version of the cot locking systems compared, I say cheap by standards, $22,000 for these new systems that we're putting in. So it doesn't even work like that. That's just a complete fallacy to scare people like they're going to spend this money and you're going to have to throw it away. No. Then it goes on about making, blah, blah, blah. The council's not informed, whatever. I don't know. Also about the ambulance, he accused the council in this next article of doing a rush job and a last minute job. I've been working on this for a year. I told the council in January we were going to replace the rig this year. This email, let's see, January 22nd, came from Villabrin's email to my email, and it came from Lifeline Services. On January 22nd, so when they went to, some of the staff went to the EMS conference, I said, look at the rigs, and if you see something that like what we've been saying we need, or you think we should look at putting in our rig, take pictures, which they did. Him and Jake and somebody else took pictures of some ideas. Some of them were very similar to what the staff had been talking about for the changes of the interior layouts of the rigs. So that's the earliest thing I got from one of these is January 22nd. So this was not a rush job. I've got all the preliminary quotes and stuff that I got from the 3 different services. 4 different services brought their rigs up here this year for us to look at, Lifeline being one of them. So yeah, this whole thing about rushing at the last minute to spend money. No, this has been a very long process. I wasn't in a hurry to build one. We have to build one, but it's the end of the year, so we're ready to go. We got the bids are due on December 4th. And December 10th, I intend to have a contract ready for you based on those bids for an ambulance. All right. He had a bunch of questions that he said you guys should have asked. you know, some of the, there's a bunch of little ones, but did the department consider operating 2 ambulances, keeping the 2011 vehicle as reserve? No, that's the worst one, that's the one that needs to go. The 2005 is actually better, yeah, just because it hasn't been used. That's not so much work here. Then he goes on to get about the runs and all that. Funny thing about the runs, he mentions about Virginia's hospital and this one thing about competing for transfers. They have a hospital there. They do more runs, but they put less miles per run. It takes us 2 hours average for medical costs. So that's something you can't compare. Sure, you're putting 700 runs in a rate, but they're like 5 minutes from the hospital, and some of them are low for their but I mean, they don't have to go the distances we go. The minimum mileage we put on a run, minimum, is 50. The absolute minimum, and that's usually if it's like, you know, right here, goes to Virginia and back. So, all right, so then there was another one about the council greenlining the ambulance purchase, where this one says, I'm looking at going with the Lifeline one, he said, without explaining his rationale. I said I was leaning towards Lifeline one, based on the 3 preliminary quotes that I got from them. Not final bids, but just quotes. Lifeline they were all very close, I said that. And Lifeline, I thought in the end was probably gonna be a little bit cheaper. Also happens to be the closest to us, they're built in Iowa. The other 2, one's out in Washington, and the other one's part of the Rev group that's in Florida. All right, so council did not ask about the source of funding for the purchase. Yeah, right? Yeah, I mean, we're not borrowing the money. I don't know, so that's enough of that. More patient transfers, and this is the one that Alan called me about. One of the things that was argued with us is that we were accused kind of lying about the $1,000 in net revenue, about when the paid on call. And he tried working the numbers and reworking, but now in here, in this article, after talking to Alan, he says, you know, 588 revenue for typical emergency call and 1307 for transfers. And that's Virginia to Duluth. So, the chief texted me Thanksgiving morning and had this to say. And a lot of just the informational facts were correct in there. It's not long-winded, and some of it's not relevant to wishing happy Thanksgiving, you know. I just read the Timber J article, and that was an interesting confrontation of the issues. Confrontation, if you're not familiar with the word, it's when you merge 2 or more sets of ideas, information, text, opinions, etc., into one, often in error. That's the word the chief is using. He says, I definitely did not frame the issue of increasing transfers as being a threat to Tower's viability as an ambulance service. My only caution was not to build an entire business model based on existing transfers, which our entire business model isn't based on transfers. We just said transfers can pay for paid-on-call staffing. And so far that's true. Hello. Touching things, not so okay. Anyway, let's see. If anything, it is the opposite. I see the transfer pie is getting bigger for more transfers for everyone, not necessarily excluding others. And yes, we are going to gobble up as much pie as possible from our area. Although the rest of the article was pretty much accurate, which, you know, just the facts that were stated. Other than the single-digit turn-down reference that is per month, not per year. And then further down, he texted me later and said, I won't allow that with my info. One point clarification is that all data has to be sourced as per St. Louis County. Any transfer requests to come outside of the county, we have no way to track. He mixes opinion in with news reporting. It is a journalistic no-no. I know, I was a managing editor once upon a time. And this was just a conversation. So, that's from the chief of, and then when we talked on Tuesday, and I had actually just called him out of curiosity about rig prices. I wanted to know when's the last time you bought one and what did it cost you guys? They just took delivery of one. It cost $251,000, no cot, They did get a new power load, but they traded in an old power load for $11,000. So if they were buying it all brand new, like we are having to do, it would be $282,000 is what that rig would cost. Now, it's not, the box is not an ALS, there's nothing special about the box. I don't, it's really nice, I heard, you know, but it's not an ALS box. What makes an ALS service ALS is the people and then with this, all the equipment that they stock into that box. So that's just Babbitt, which does about half of the call volume, I think, of tower, bought a new rig 2 or 3 years ago, $250,000. This is just what they cost. So anyway, he when I had talked to him, and he's like, well, I didn't read the article, but I'll get back to you when I do. I didn't think it was investment Thanksgiving. So he expressly told Marshall not to compare Virginia to Tower or any other service because every service is unique and has to adapt to what they've got to do. There are some things you can, you know, draw parallels, but you can't just flat out start comparing services to each other. Certainly not us with a full-time department. There are other departments that are way closer, still not exact to what we do. So here's some information that the chief had given me. Transfers are 1/3 of their runs, half of their income. I told you about the price of the, so here's where the budgets come in. 2017, obviously 2018 is done. 2017, they made $3.2 million in revenue. They spent 4.5. 1.3 million funded out of the general fund, almost 29%. Hell, if the city wants to start funding us at 29% out of the general fund, I'd be thrilled. We could do all kinds of crazy stuff. Not realistic, and thankfully we don't have to do it that way because of that, keeping the funds with the payments. So in that one article too, he was quick to jump on the fact that there was only 9 transfers in October. Well, yeah, there was. Guess what? There's probably not going to be 12 in November either. Everybody, the whole area is going through a lull right now. It's weird. Not just for transfers, we're talking medical calls too. Everybody is like, just. So what? Yeah. So what you? When I figured the transfers, I only figured the shortest distance of transfers for revenue projections, for paid on call, for paying for paid on call. $1,000, Virginia to Duluth. So I used the lowest number. I never accounted for ALS transfers. Those figures were never in my figures. I never accounted for the longer runs, like even from the other hospitals to Duluth, generates more revenue. And then the long transfers, didn't account for any of them because had no way of knowing how many we would do, right? Those are 2 to 2.5 times. So you do one long transfer, it's like doing 2 to 2.5 Virginia to Duluth transfers. So this year, out of the 103 transfers that we've already done, 3 were ALS. That's just an extra $1,500, $500 each. 20 were the other hospital to Duluth, so more revenue generated. And 39 of them were the long transfers. So tons of extra revenue that I never counted on because I had no way of proving how many we could do. That's why it was just based on the lowest, which is kind of like a responsible way of doing it. Go with the highest expenses, the lowest revenue. So far, my numbers are correct, better than correct, actually. I mean, I overestimated on what we'd spend, underestimated on what we'd make, and it is working out. The one article in that where he after that 6-month update, he says that his calculations are correct because there's a drop in the revenue. Well, because we only had 62,000 profit. What he left out of that was that, if you recall, I explained and showed the $30,000 of profit that we had spent extra this year. It wasn't never in the budget. Spent $6,600 to finish paying for the snowmobile trailer when it was delivered in January. $6,600 in pagers and radios. What were some of the other big ticket items? I don't remember. Well, actually now it's spent about $50,000 of profit money. So actually for this year,
I've pretty much, I think I've spent all the profit money, the 50 extra grand that we made, because the $15,000 cot now, 15 grand total in those stupid repairs for the breakdowns, that's just can't be right. But $35,000 in equipment, upgrades, all that stuff that I mentioned before. So I guess after all of that, I'm trying to figure out, one, the point of continually attacking me through these articles and trying to scare people like this is some kind of huge disaster. And I'd really like to know what makes him qualified to make all these judgments. The information that I have and the numbers that I have are true. Everything that he's provided is not true. I mean, does he have some sort of master business model that he's been successful with lately? Would that be like the daycare? 5 months it went out of business, $30,000, $40,000 spent, full-time director hired, gone. Let's look at financial. Apparently he must be a financial wizard and I'm an idiot. What, the only thing I know financially that he's done lately is as the president of TITA. He secured, personally, helped secure that money and made sure it was given to Orland. That is a matching grant fund. After a year and a half later, there isn't a single receipt in matching expenditures. No collateral and no financials given to prove that you can pay it back. I'm not sure how you call that responsible money management. That's it. I don't know if you have any questions for me, but.
Any questions for Steve on the ambulance director report at all?
Has any calls gone unanswered since the PDOT call started?
Unanswered?
Yeah.
One weekend one, because we don't have, well,
Everybody
weekends.
was out, right?
Yeah, there was not a volunteer staff available. We had one weekend call that we missed. No, there's been no calls during the week. And I was gonna print out the drop in response times from the states and stuff. I can get that for you guys. But it's, obviously the response times have improved and the volunteer staffs are much relieved that there's somebody else helping.
Well, Steve, at the end of the day, and I know, I think you kind of need the opportunity to clear the air with everyone as far as how the ambulance's health is. I appreciate you doing that. I don't necessarily know that we needed to hear it, but because we entrusted you to take care of that service. It's one of the top ambulance services in the Arrowhead region, if not the state. It's been run very well from its inception to now. You've got full faith in this council, so.
I appreciate that, and I know that I know most of that stuff you guys probably already knew and understood. In large part, it was for everyone else who has been misled and lied to for all these months.
Anything else for Steve?
Thank you.
Can I just add something really quick, Josh? Something I know all too well, and that's at 4 or 9 in the morning when you get a huge sweat on your forehead and you need help, and you make a 911 call. To see the friendly faces of people like Steve and Matt and the rest of the gang and the new appointees, hopefully here in a minute, the value of all of our medical institutions, the clinic, the ambulance, is priceless, what the commercial says. And we need it. You understand how priceless it is.
Thank you. We'll move on to 6.6, hire Mike Larson as an emergency medical responder.
So, Mike Larson, for those that aren't aware, is already a firefighter. He completed his EMR course and got his license, and has applied to be a EMR on the fire department and also for the ambulance.
Fantastic, happy to have him there.
Make a motion to accept.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So move to 6.7, resolution 2018, number 015. I think most of you have already heard that on November 14th, Herb Lampa passed away. Herb was mayor of the city of Howard for a number of terms in two different spells. He was also a county commissioner. Obviously, he's deeply embedded in everything that is the city of Howard. Proclamation remembering the late Herbert Lampa. I'll read through this proclamation. Whereas Herbert Lampa, an individual who has cared deeply and strongly for this community and is virtually embedded in the infrastructure and growth of this community. And whereas Herbert Lampa has lived for 70 years in Tower, during which time he has established a sincere advocacy for many of the topics and issues the city of Tower faced throughout the years. Whereas Herbert Lampa has served on the Tower City Council and as the mayor of Tower for 4 terms. And whereas Herb was no stranger to City Hall and the Tower community and served as county commissioner and a teacher for many years. And whereas Herb can be credited with much of the progress and developments that fill the City of Tower's history. And whereas it is with great disappointment and sadness that elected officials and city staff learned of Herb's passing on Wednesday, the 14th day of November, 2018. Now therefore, be it resolved that the City Council of Tower does hereby honor Herbert R. Lampa for his many years of civic participation, recognizing his tireless efforts on behalf of not only the City of Tower, but St. Louis County. The City Council of the City of Tower hereby declares November 14th as Herbert Lampa Day in the City of Tower. Obviously, our condolences go out to the Lampa family. Anything anyone would like to add?
There's also an email from Darryl in your packet. He just wanted to outline things that his dad did to make sure I get that to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any motion on that?
Yes, please.
I will make that motion.
Any other discussion?
Make sure that we get the cards and those.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on to the 2019 budget.
This is your first chance to see in the budget, just like normal, coming at the end of November. So I don't expect you to approve it tonight. This does go on a 0.5% levy increase. There's copies for you in your packet today, and then I expect that on December 10th we'll go through questions or line by
Is this both
line.
revenue and expenditure?
We have both of
Okay.
them are in there. I think the expenditures first, followed by the revenue.
Fantastic.
If anybody has any questions, call me, email me, text me, whatever, or we'll go through it on the 10th, and then, like I said, it's a 0.5% levy increase.
Okay. Any questions or discussion on 2018 budget? If not, we'll move on to 6.9, asking negotiations. Are all the bargaining unit members here?
Only one is requesting a change, and she is here. The other two are asking for no change. There is a note in your packet under 6.9, what their request is now. They've kind of fine-tuned it since the last meeting.
All right.
So if you want to make a motion to close.
So we need to close the meeting. There's a motion to close and support. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Close the meeting for negotiations for a member of the absentee bargaining unit. Take a quick break.
So as before, the city has to keep a record, of that
7/12.
so the cameras.
Yep.
But,
Oh, Rachel.
no one's allowed to look at them until after the.
I saw your email.
So,